She slept in his arms, and the scar-proved fate had brought them back together. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The sirens sliced through the night rain as Dr. Elias Reed ran toward the emergency bay, his white coat soaked, breath fogging in the icy wind. He'd seen 1,000 accidents before, but something about this one felt different. He could feel it pulsing in his chest like a memory trying to surface. The paramedics shouted over the storm. Female, mid-20s, unconscious, possible hypothermia, blunt trauma. Elias pushed through the stretcher team, his eyes locking on the pale face beneath the oxygen mask. Her hair was tangled and wet, sticking to her cheeks, but the moment he saw the small, crescent-shaped scar near her collarbone, his world stopped. It couldn't be. He froze, the sound of the rain fading into silence. That scar, the same one he'd stitched 3 years ago, on a girl who had disappeared after a crash he could never forget. She had the same soft jawline, the same small freckle beneath her left ear. For years, he'd told himself she hadn't survived. Now here she was, lying motionless under the harsh fluorescent light, fate bringing her back when he least expected it. Let's get her inside, he ordered, snapping back into motion. Inside the trauma room, the steady rhythm of monitors filled the air. He worked mechanically oxygen, IV line, pulse check, but his hands trembled just enough for the nurse beside him to notice. Dr. Reed, are you okay? He nodded, though his throat felt tight. Yeah, I just know this patient. Her pulse was weak, her skin cold as ice. As the team cleared, Elias lingered. He brushed a damp strand of hair from her face, his fingers hovering above that familiar scar. You came back, he whispered, voice barely audible. Outside, thunder rolled across the city, like fate answering him. Hours later, the hospital quieted. Most of the staff had gone home, leaving only the hum of machines and the faint hiss of rain on the windows. Elias sat by her bedside, watching the rise and fall of her chest. He remembered the last night he'd seen her smoke, glass, and firelight on her face as he pulled her from the wreck. She'd looked at him through tears and whispered, "If we ever meet again, you'll know me by the scar." He had thought it was just delirium, the last words of someone fading away. Now, here she was, breathing, fragile, real. He couldn't tell if it was science or destiny that had returned her to him, but it didn't matter. All he knew was that somewhere between loss and miracle, his heart had started to beat again. The rain outside eased into a soft drizzle. Elias reached for a blanket and tucked it around her shoulders. You're safe now, he said softly, more to himself than to her. When her hand twitched beneath the sheet, his breath caught. Maybe it was a reflex. Maybe it was something else. But in that quiet room, surrounded by the echoes of machines and memory, he felt it the unmistakable pull of fate, stitching two broken souls back together, one heartbeat at a time. The next morning, the sky above the city was washed in gray, a soft drizzle clinging to the hospital windows. Dr. Elias Reed had barely slept. The image of the woman on the stretcher haunted him, that familiar scar glinting beneath the fluorescent lights. He kept telling himself it was impossible, that fate was not something science could measure, yet every instinct in him said otherwise. When he entered the recovery ward, the world seemed to slow. She was awake now, propped up slightly against the pillow, her skin pale but her eyes alert, cautious. Her voice was a whisper. Where am I? Elias steadied himself before answering. Westbridge Private Hospital. You were in an accident last night. You are safe now. She blinked, confusion clouding her expression. How long have I been here? Since midnight, he replied softly. You were lucky. Someone found you when they did. Her gaze shifted to his name tag. Dr. Reed. She said it slowly, as if the sound of it stirred something half buried in her memory. He nodded, forcing a professional smile even as his chest tightened. Yes. How are you feeling? Like I have been run over by a train, she murmured with a weak laugh. He smiled back, relieved to hear a trace of humor. You will make a full recovery. You just need rest. But when she shifted slightly, the blanket slipped from her shoulder, and the edge of that crescent scar came into view again. Elias quickly looked away, pretending to check the IV drip. You should keep that covered for now, he said gently. It is still healing. She touched the spot absently. This one? It has been there for years. I do not even remember how I got it. The words hit him like a silent blow. Of course she did not remember. She had been unconscious when he pulled her from that burning car 3 years ago. And by the time he returned to check the ICU, she had vanished without a trace. No name, no records, just the memory of her voice saying, If we ever meet again, you will know me by the scar. He cleared his throat. Well, it is an old wound, but you are healing well. She studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly. You look like someone who does not sleep much. Occupational hazard, he said, grateful for the shift in tone. Coffee helps. Then, maybe you should get some, she teased lightly. You look like you need it more than I do. That small exchange loosened something inside him, a warmth he had not felt in years. For days afterward, Elias found reasons to check on her vitals, test results, medication schedules. Each time they talked a little more. Her name was Ava Sinclair. She was a photojournalist who traveled often, documenting post-disaster zones. Her injuries were from a mountain road collapse on her way back to the city. She had lost her camera, her notebook, nearly everything. You know, she said one afternoon, you have the kind of eyes people write about, always observing, never resting. Elias chuckled softly. I will take that as a compliment. You should, she said, smiling for the first time. You do not talk much, but when you do, it sounds like you mean every word. He hesitated before replying, Some things are worth saying only once. That evening, after finishing his rounds, Elias passed her room again. The lights were dimmed, the steady monitor beeping like a quiet heartbeat. Ava was asleep, her breathing even, her face peaceful against the pillow. He stood there longer than he should have, watching the rise and fall of her chest, feeling something both terrifying and gentle stirring inside him. Fate had given him a second chance, but he did not yet know if it was mercy or a test. As he turned to leave, Ava murmured softly in her sleep, Eli. He froze. No one had called him that in years, not since the night of the fire. He looked back, his pulse quickening. She did not wake, but her hand moved slightly, fingers curling, as if reaching for someone she once knew. For the first time in a long while, Elias felt hope return, not the blinding kind, but the quiet, steady flame that told him their story was far from over. Days passed, and Westbridge Hospital began to feel less like a sterile building and more like a place where time quietly held its breath. Ava regained color in her cheeks, the bruises fading, her laughter beginning to echo softly through the halls. Every morning, Elias checked her progress under the guise of routine, but he knew the truth. He simply wanted to see her awake and alive. She teased him about his seriousness, called him Dr. Stoneface, and he pretended to be annoyed, though her voice had already become a sound he looked forward to hearing. One rainy afternoon, Ava sat by the window in her wheelchair, sketching with a pencil she had borrowed from the nurse's desk. Outside, the city shimmered under silver clouds. Elias walked in quietly, holding her latest test results. Good news, he said, glancing at her chart. Your recovery is faster than expected. You might be discharged within a week. She looked up, smiling. And leave all this first-class service? You will miss me, Dr. Reed. Elias tried to play along. Hospitals do get quieter without their loudest patients. Ava chuckled, her eyes glinting. You are terrible at pretending you do not care. He froze for a second, then smirked, deflecting. I am terrible at many things, Miss Sinclair. She lowered her gaze back to her drawing. You know, when I was trapped under the metal, I remember thinking that if someone found me, I would never take a day for granted again. But then I woke up here, and I saw that scar again. Elias's heart stopped. The one on your shoulder? Yes, she said softly. It is strange. Sometimes, when I touch it, I see flashes of light and glass, like a memory trying to return. He forced his voice to stay even. That could be trauma recall. It happens after severe accidents. She nodded, though her tone was distant. Maybe. Or maybe it is something else. Silence lingered for a moment, broken only by the steady rhythm of rain against the glass. Finally, Elias said quietly, sometimes, memories find their way back when we are ready to face them. Ava turned to him, studying his expression. You speak like someone who has lost something too. His throat tightened. Maybe I have. She smiled faintly, accepting his answer without pressing further. That evening, after finishing his shift, Elias returned to her room again. The lights were dim. Ava had fallen asleep with the pencil still in her hand. On her bedside table lay the drawing she had been working on, a man standing in the rain, his head bowed, his coat flaring behind him. Elias felt his breath catch. It was him, every detail down to the stethoscope around his neck. She had drawn him from memory, even though she had never seen him outside the hospital. He stepped closer, fingertips grazing the edge of the paper. Ava, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Her eyes fluttered open. Eli? He froze, the sound of that name pulling every nerve in his chest tight. You said my name, he murmured. She blinked, confused. Did I? I must have dreamed it. What were you dreaming about? Fire, she whispered, her eyes unfocused. And someone's voice. Yours, maybe. You said, hold on. I am not letting you go. His pulse pounded in his ears. He tried to speak, but no words came out. She smiled faintly, unaware of the storm inside him. You saved me, did you not? She murmured before drifting back into sleep. Elias stood motionless, every piece of his past crashing against the present. The rain outside had stopped, but inside, his heart felt like it was still falling. He pulled the blanket higher over her shoulder and whispered, Yes, I did. Once. When he left the room, the drawing remained on the table, the pencil lines smudged by her touch, and the faint curve of the scar on her shoulder glowed in the soft light like fate, quietly reminding him that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, was about to surface. The next few days moved like pages turning in slow motion. Ava's strength returned, but so did the shadows in her eyes. Every time she tried to remember the night of her first accident, the pain behind her temples grew sharper. Elias kept his distance, trying to remain professional, but the secret pressed against his conscience like a heartbeat he could no longer ignore. One morning, she found him sitting by the window, staring at the rain. You look like a man carrying ghosts, she said softly. He smiled faintly. Maybe I am. Hospitals collect them. Not just hospitals, she murmured. People do too. She rolled her sleeve down, hiding the scar. Sometimes I feel like this mark is more than an accident. Elias hesitated. Do you really want to know where it came from? Her eyes searched his face. Do you know? He exhaled slowly, torn between the doctor's oath and the truth clawing its way out. I might. But before he could say more, a nurse entered with a clipboard. The moment dissolved, leaving words unsaid. That night, as the city slept, Elias sat in his office staring at an old medical file. The name on the form had long been smudged by smoke and time, but he knew every note, every stitch pattern by heart. He had kept it hidden all these years, not as a trophy, but as proof that she had existed. He whispered to himself, She was real. I did not imagine her. He closed the folder and rubbed his eyes. When he finally walked past Ava's room, he saw her awake, sitting under the soft glow of the bedside lamp, reading her own discharge papers. "Leaving so soon?" he asked quietly. "I need to find out who I was before all this," she said without looking up. "Maybe there are pieces of me still waiting out there." "And if what you find hurts?" he asked. She lifted her gaze. "Then I will know it is real." Her words struck something deep in him. Elias stepped closer, his voice low. "Ava, there is something you should know." Before he could finish, the power flickered and the lights went out. The storm outside had returned with a vengeance, thunder rumbling through the halls. In the dim emergency light, Ava's face looked pale, almost ghostly. "It is okay," he said, grabbing a flashlight from the wall. "Stay here. I will check the breakers." But before he left, she reached out, her hand brushing his wrist. "Do not go far, Eli." The name rolled off her tongue, like instinct. He froze, the beam of light trembling in his grip. "What did you just call me?" She blinked, startled. "Eli. I do not know why I said that." His heart pounded. "You used to." Her lips parted, confusion flooding her expression. "Used to?" He swallowed hard. 3 years ago. I was there the night of your first accident. I pulled you from the wreck. You said if we ever met again, I would know you by the scar. The room went silent, except for the rain hammering the windows. Ava stared at him, disbelief flickering into realization. It was you." He nodded slowly. "I did not tell you, because I thought it would hurt you to remember." But the truth kept finding its way back. She covered her mouth, tears brimming in her eyes. "All this time, you knew me." Elias stepped closer, his voice breaking. "I never stopped looking for you." For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. The power surged back on, filling the room with light, and in that light, she saw him tired, honest, trembling, not just her doctor, but the man who had once held her through fire. She whispered, "Fate really does not forget, does it?" Elias smiled sadly. "No, it just waits until we are ready." As the thunder rolled one last time, she reached for his hand. Their fingers met, the scar between them, no longer just a wound, but proof that sometimes the universe stitches souls together the same way he once stitched her skin delicately, painfully, and with purpose. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds, soft and golden after a night of thunder. The storm had left the world washed clean, but inside Elias's heart, the turmoil still churned. He had confessed the truth, and though Ava had not pushed him away, she had also not spoken since. When he entered her room, she sat by the window, a cup of coffee cooling between her hands. Her eyes were red, but calm. "Did you not sleep?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "I kept seeing the fire, the crash, the way you looked at me." "It is strange, Eli. I lost years of my life. But the moment you said it was you, everything started coming back. The smell of smoke, the sound of your voice saying, 'Hold on.'" Elias took a slow breath. "I should have told you sooner." "You saved my life twice," she said softly. "You do not have to apologize for that." He smiled faintly, relieved yet uncertain. "Do you remember anything else? Before the accident?" Ava stared out at the sunlight. "Fragments. My camera. The photographs I took that week. There was a story I was chasing an illegal mining company upstate. The crash was no accident, Eli. Someone tampered with my brakes." The words hung heavy between them. Elias frowned. "Are you sure?" "I was following a lead that night. I had proof of something big. I think they wanted to silence me." She turned to him, her voice steady now. "That means whoever did it might still be out there." Elias's protective instinct surged. "Then you cannot go looking for them." "Not yet. You need to heal first." "You sound like my doctor again," she said, a small smile touching her lips. "That is the only way I know how to keep you safe," he replied. Later that day, Ava insisted on walking the corridor for the first time without the wheelchair. Her steps were unsteady, but Elias stayed close, ready to catch her if she stumbled. Halfway down the hall, she paused, pressing a hand to her temple as a flash of memory hit headlights, metal twisting, and a man's voice shouting behind her. She gasped, clutching the rail. "Ava!" Elias steadied her. "What did you see?" "A truck," she whispered. "It hit us on purpose." Her knees buckled, and he caught her just in time, her body collapsing against his chest. Her head rested near his heart, her breathing fast and shallow. "You are okay," he murmured, holding her close. "You are safe." But as she trembled in his arms, something shifted inside both of them, an unspoken truth, that safety was no longer enough. That night, as rain began again, Ava woke from a nightmare, calling his name. Elias rushed in, finding her sitting up, tears streaking her face. "I dreamed it again," she said. "The fire, the crash, the moment you reached for me. I was so sure I would die, and then I felt your hands pulling me out." He sat beside her, taking her hand carefully. "You did not die. You fought your way back. Because you would not let me go," she whispered. "And now fate brought us here again. Maybe to finish what we started." Elias met her gaze, his own voice low and rough. "Maybe fate just wanted to give us another chance." She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his chest. "Do you believe in that, Eli? Second chances?" He smiled, though his eyes glistened. "I do now." She sighed, exhausted, and before he could move, she fell asleep in his arms. He sat there, unmoving, her heart beat against his hand resting over the scar on her shoulder, the same one that had led her back to him. For the first time in years, the hospital did not feel like a place of endings. It felt like a beginning, fragile and extraordinary, built on everything they had survived. Outside, dawn was rising again, slow and tender, as if the world itself was learning to breathe anew, just like them. The morning after Ava fell asleep in his arms, Elias found himself watching her with quiet awe. For the first time since the fire, she looked peaceful, her breath steady, her face relaxed. He carefully slipped out from beneath her and pulled the blanket up to her shoulders. When she stirred, her eyes fluttered open, and she smiled faintly. "You stayed," she whispered. Elias nodded. "I said I would." The words came naturally, like they had been waiting years to be spoken. Over the next few days, her recovery moved from physical to emotional. They began taking short walks around the hospital garden, the air crisp and fragrant with the smell of pine. Ava's memory came back in fragments, each one sharper than the last. One afternoon, as the wind brushed through the trees, she stopped suddenly. "I remember the truck," she said softly. The company logo on the side. It was black with gold lettering. Helios Mining. Elias's jaw tightened. He knew that name. It was the same corporation whose executives had donated millions to the hospital last year. "You cannot investigate this alone," he said quickly. "They are powerful, Ava. Dangerous." She looked up at him, determination lighting her eyes. "I am not afraid anymore. Someone has to tell the truth." Elias hesitated. "Then let me help you." The offer surprised even him. She smiled, a mix of relief and gratitude. "You already have." That evening, Elias went through the hospital archives, searching through old donation files, board reports, and contracts. He found a name, Nathan Carter, Chief Financial Officer of Helios Mining, and the same man who had been behind multiple shady transactions. The deeper he looked, the clearer it became. Ava's crash had not been random. Someone had wanted to bury her story forever. The next morning, he showed her what he found. She read the papers in silence, her hands trembling slightly. "He tried to kill me," she said finally, her voice steady but filled with disbelief. Elias reached out, covering her hand with his. "He failed. You survived for a reason. To finish what I started," she whispered. Later that week, Ava convinced the local authorities to reopen the case with the new evidence Elias had uncovered. When a detective arrived at the hospital to take her statement, she spoke with confidence, no longer the fragile patient who had arrived half-broken weeks ago. Elias stood beside her the entire time, silent but unwavering. That night, as the storm clouds rolled back in, Ava walked to the rooftop terrace. The city below glimmered like spilled stars. Elias found her there, the wind playing with her hair. "You should be resting," he said gently. "I feel alive, for the first time," she replied. "I used to think my scar was something ugly, something I had to hide. But now I see it differently. It is a reminder that even after fire, there can still be life." Elias stepped closer, his voice low. "That scar saved you. It brought you back." She turned toward him, eyes reflecting the city lights. "No, Eli. You did." For a moment, they stood in silence, the world around them fading. Then, almost without thinking, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. She did not move away. "You were always the one who saved me," she whispered, "even when I did not remember your name." He smiled, his heart steady for the first time in years. "Then let us promise each other something," he said softly. "No more running from the past. No more ghosts." She nodded, her eyes shining with tears. "Only healing." The rain began again, gentle and cleansing, wrapping the city in silver. Ava leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder, as lightning flashed in the distance. Elias whispered, "This time, I am not letting you go." And under that endless sky, with the storm as their witness, the doctor who had once saved her life finally allowed himself to believe that some wounds were never meant to be hidden. They were meant to lead two people back to where they truly belonged. The next few days passed in a blur of interviews, statements, and flashing camera lights outside the hospital gates. The story of Ava Sinclair, the journalist who survived 2 near-death accidents, spread quickly. Reporters wanted the exclusive, but Elias shielded her from the noise. He stayed by her side through every interrogation, every moment of doubt. Yet, beneath the calm surface, danger lingered. One night, Elias walked Ava back to her room after another long meeting with the detectives. The hallway lights flickered, and the faint hum of the hospital at night felt heavier than usual. Ava noticed his tension. "You are quiet," she said softly. "Something is wrong." He exhaled slowly. "I think someone has been watching you. This case, Helios Mining, it reaches further than we thought." Her eyes widened. "Do you think they know I am alive?" "They will soon," he admitted. "You are the one person who can expose them." Ava looked down at her hands, still trembling. "Then, we have to move fast." The next day, while the police built their case, Elias received an anonymous envelope, slid under his office door. Inside was a single photo Ava, sitting by the hospital window with the words, "She should have stayed dead," scrawled across the back. His stomach turned cold. He locked the office door, picked up the phone, and called the detective. Within hours, additional security was assigned to her room. But fear was a patient enemy, creeping in despite every precaution. That night, rain lashed against the hospital windows again. Elias was reviewing patient charts when the power suddenly flickered out. The emergency lights glowed dim red. He rushed into the hallway, his heart pounding. From the end of the corridor came the faint echo of a scream, Ava's voice. He sprinted toward her room, pushing the door open just in time to see a shadowy figure slip through the emergency exit. Ava was sitting up, shaking, the curtain torn from its hooks. "Someone was here," she gasped. He tried to unplug the machines. Elias's pulse roared in his ears. He pressed the call button for help, wrapping an arm around her. "You are safe now. I promise." Within minutes, security swarmed the floor, but the intruder was gone. The detective arrived, furious. "We will increase surveillance. She cannot leave this room alone again." When they were finally alone, Ava looked at Elias. fear replaced by something fiercer. He wanted me silent, she said. That means we are close. Ava, this is not worth your life, he said firmly. Let the authorities handle it. But she shook her head. I will not hide anymore, Eli. If I stop now, everything I went through means nothing. Elias knew that tone unshakable, stubborn, brave. He had fallen in love with that voice once before, and he was falling again now. Days later, the police arrested a man connected to Helios Mining, Nathan Carter himself. He was charged with tampering with Ava's vehicle and obstruction of justice. When the news broke, the entire hospital staff gathered in the lobby to watch the broadcast. Ava stood beside Elias, her hands clasped tightly. It is over, he whispered. You did it. But she shook her head. We did. The relief was overwhelming. Yet there was something deeper in her gaze when she turned to him. You know, Eli, she said softly. Maybe fate did not bring me back to expose them. Maybe it brought me back to find you again. Elias smiled, his throat tightening. Either way, I am not letting fate take you away a second time. As the police led Nathan Carter away on television, the city outside seemed to exhale. Justice had arrived. Not with fireworks, but with quiet certainty. In that moment, surrounded by flashing screens and applause, Ava and Elias stood still, their fingers intertwining. The danger had passed, but the bond between them was only growing stronger. Somewhere deep down, both of them understood healing was not just about surviving the wounds. It was about finding the one person who could make you believe that the scars were worth it. After Nathan Carter's arrest, the tension around the hospital slowly dissolved, replaced by a kind of quiet relief that neither Elias nor Ava had felt in years. The world outside celebrated her courage, but inside those white walls, the two of them found peace in smaller things: the sound of morning footsteps in the corridor, the smell of coffee, the sunlight spilling through the blinds. Ava's health had improved enough for her discharge, but she delayed it, claiming she wanted to finish the police paperwork. Elias knew the truth. She was not ready to leave him yet, and he was not ready to let her go. One afternoon, they sat together in the hospital garden. The roses had begun to bloom, and the city skyline shimmered beyond the trees. Ava traced the scar on her shoulder absent-mindedly. It does not hurt anymore, she said softly. Sometimes I even forget it is there. Elias looked at her with a gentle smile. That means it is healed. Scars are proof that pain can end. She tilted her head, studying him. You talk like you have some of your own. He hesitated, then nodded. We all do. Mine are just not visible. She reached across the table and touched his hand. Maybe that is why we found each other again, to remind ourselves that healing is possible. He looked down at their joined hands, her warmth steady against his skin. You think fate works like that? She smiled. I do not think. I know. Later that week, the hospital hosted a small ceremony to honor Ava for her bravery in exposing the corruption case. Cameras flashed, journalists cheered, and police officers shook her hand. But as the crowd thinned, Ava's eyes searched only for Elias. He stood at the edge of the room, proud yet quiet, his white coat gleaming under the soft lights. When their eyes met, it felt like time folded back to that night. The rain, the wreckage, the moment he refused to let her die. After the ceremony, she found him in the rooftop garden where it had all begun. You missed the champagne, she teased. Doctors are not supposed to drink on duty, he said, smiling. So, technically, you are still working? Only if it means keeping an eye on my favorite patient. She laughed, a sound light and effortless. For a moment, the world seemed simple again, but then her tone softened. Eli, what happens now? He turned toward her, the city wind tugging at his hair. Whatever you want to happen. You have your life back, your story. You do not owe anyone anything, not even me. But I want to stay, she said quickly. Not because I owe you, but because I choose to. He blinked, taken aback. Ava. She stepped closer, her eyes unwavering. You spent years carrying guilt for saving me once, thinking you failed when I disappeared. But you did not fail. You saved me again, in every way that matters. He took a deep breath, emotion catching in his chest. You are not the only one who found healing here. She smiled through tears. Then we are even. The wind rustled through the leaves, and the city lights below flickered like distant stars. Elias reached for her hand, his thumb brushing the edge of her scar. This brought you back to me, he whispered. Maybe it was never a mark of pain. Maybe it was a promise. Ava leaned in, her voice trembling but sure. Then let us keep it. They stood in silence, their foreheads touching, the hum of the city fading beneath the rhythm of their breathing. For the first time in years, neither of them felt broken. They were whole not because the past had vanished, but because they had faced it together. Somewhere behind them, the hospital clock chimed softly, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. And under that golden dusk, Elias finally whispered the words he had held for too long. You were always meant to come back. Ava smiled, her eyes shining. And this time, I am not leaving. Spring returned to the city quietly, the kind of season that painted everything new, without asking permission. Weeks had passed since the ceremony, and Westbridge Hospital was back to its rhythm of life, patience, laughter, and stories beginning and ending every day. But for Elias and Ava, it was no longer just a hospital. It was where two broken paths had finally merged into one. Ava had started working part-time with the hospital's community outreach program, documenting recovery stories and helping patients rediscover purpose through art. Her photographs now hung in the main lobby, a gallery of light and survival. Each frame carried a story, but one photo stood apart from the rest. It showed two hands, one scarred, one steady, intertwined against the background of a sunrise. Beneath it was a small plaque that read, "Some scars are proof that we lived." One afternoon, as she adjusted the frames, she heard footsteps behind her. Elias approached, his white coat unbuttoned, his usual composure softened by the warmth in his eyes. They called to ask if you could expand the exhibit to other hospitals, he said. Seems like your story has inspired more people than you realize. She smiled, brushing dust from the frame. It was never just my story. He stepped closer. No, it was ours. The air between them felt different now. Lighter, fuller, alive. They walked outside to the hospital garden, the same place where she had once traced her scar under a cold sky. Now the air was filled with the scent of jasmine and sunlight. Do you ever think about that night? She asked. Every day, he admitted. But not with regret anymore. It brought you back. It brought us here. She nodded, watching the petals drift across the path. You know, for years I thought scars meant the story was over. Now I know. They just mean it survived. He smiled. And sometimes, survival is the most beautiful story of all. A few weeks later, Westbridge held a small charity gala to raise funds for trauma recovery programs. Ava had been asked to speak. She stood at the podium, the room silent, faces turned toward her. Elias watched from the front row, his heart swelling with pride. 3 years ago, Ava began, I was in a crash that should have ended my life, but someone refused to let me go. He stitched my wounds, but he also stitched something deeper, the will to keep living. This scar on my shoulder used to remind me of fear. Now it reminds me of love, and of how fate has a way of bringing people back when they are meant to find each other. Her voice caught, but she smiled, steady and radiant. Healing is not forgetting what hurt us. It is learning to look at it and say, this is where I began again. The crowd erupted in applause. Elias felt tears sting his eyes, but he did not hide them. When she stepped off the stage, she found him waiting. Without a word, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a silver necklace, with a pendant shaped like a crescent moon, identical to the scar that had once bound them. A reminder, he said softly, that fate leaves marks on us for a reason. She looked at it, Then at him, her voice trembling. You kept believing, even when I forgot. He smiled. Someone had to. She took the necklace, fastened it around her neck, and whispered, Then let us not forget anymore. He held out his hand. She placed hers in his. The music from the gala swelled softly behind them. But for Elias and Ava, the world had narrowed to this moment, the quiet proof that life, no matter how scarred, could still be whole again. As they walked out under the starlit sky, she leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder, and for the first time, the scar that once defined her did not hurt at all. It simply glowed, gentle and silver, a final whisper from fate that some stories are not about endings at all, they are about coming home.